Today on Locked On Canadiens, a goalie carousel yet again, but due to injury this time. We talk about the Laval Rocket, how they're doing, are they going to make the playoffs or not? And finally, our weekly 3-up and 3-down segment, and that's all coming up on this episode of Locked On Canadiens.
Your Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 591. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. My name is Laura Saba, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Scott Matla. And if you're in your 30s and you're watching YouTube, remember to get enough sleep, because this is what you look like on a Sunday morning if you do not.
I was like, is this an attack at me or an attack on yourself?
No, it's me. I have my ring light on, and I have the puffiness and the dark circles. This is what happens when you don't sleep enough.
I was gonna say, it's like, I know I went to bed late last night because our friend Jay from Locked On Blue Jackets yelled at me to go to bed when I was trying to write an article at 11:30 last night because I'm like,
Jay.
Hi, Jay. I was like, my eyes hurt. I should go to bed. Or should I open an energy drink and continue writing? And I got yelled at until I went to bed. So
no, you look fresh-faced. I do not.
I do not feel fresh-faced for what that's worth. Because that's what this is for. So
the moral of the story is, kids, get enough sleep. Sleep is important. Prioritize it. Anyway, somebody who was going to need a lot of rest now is Jake Allen, unfortunately, who got injured in the game against Toronto. Scott, what did you think of that game? I thought the Canadiens had one job, and they failed to execute it. They needed to prevent Austin Matthews from getting that 50-50. Instead, he got 51 in 50. I don't care if you call it unofficial or official or whatever. There were 50 game span, and he scored 50 goals. And for whatever reason, people are focusing on the fact that Habs fans like to enjoy Cole Caulfield goals.
It's just like we talked about in the previous week, where we don't look forward to like Habs-Leafs matchups because it's this dumb pissing contest between both fan bases. And the only thing I've seen on Twitter this morning is not people celebrating Matthews continuing to set Toronto records. He has a chance to be the first 100-point scorer in Toronto since Doug Gilmour. They're talking about a Habs fan who says they can't wait for the day that Cole Caulfield has more goals than Austin Matthews in a season. And that's what they're fixated on. And I don't get it. You're 49 points ahead of the Habs in the standings. Like, you're punching down at this point. And it proves that those playoffs last year broke their brains more than usual. The game itself was what we expected. Toronto's a better team than the Canadiens. It was an ugly game, at least through the first period. Montreal kind of got back on track as it went along. But the first period was kind of a break point, and unfortunately, Jake Allen trying to make an impossible save when Matthews scored early in that game. He popped his groin. It looked like it was either that or a hamstring. He went off, and Eric Engels tweeted that he had ran into him after the game, and Jake just said it's a season from hell. It's like nothing can go right for him, and you have to feel bad for that. And It is worth noting, despite allowing a goal in the first shot he faced, Samuel Montembeault, I thought, was very, very good in that game. I said it on Mike O'Brien's Twitter space when we did the second intermission thing, was it's the same game he plays every time. He allows the first shot he sees, and then he settles in to be phenomenal the rest of the game. Caulfield scored. Josh Anderson absolutely retired Mark Giordano with a hit along the end boards. It was a 3-2 game. They didn't let Matthews get the hat trick for 100 points. They did well. The power play is an issue, and we've known that for a while. But all things considered, that game could have gotten a lot worse, and it didn't. The Canadiens hung in there. They killed a 5-on-3 penalty. Like, there's positives to take away from the game that, overwhelmingly wasn't great on paper for the team, and that's what I'm choosing to stick with right here. They didn't win, but they showed, their fight in some categories there. And I think that's an important facet.
So we have to admit that Toronto is a really, really good team, at least in the regular season for now. I'm going to just throw that in. It was 3-1. But there were a couple of things that I wanted to draw attention to that Toronto did that I really liked, and I would like the Canadiens to also do. I feel like this is something that good teams really, really do. There was a lot, I don't know if what broadcast you were watching, but on Sportsnet, they were measuring shifts a lot, and for the Toronto Maple Leaf shifts. And there were certain cases where I felt like they left a guy like Willie Nylander out too long, or Austin Matthews out too long. Obviously, you want to try and give him that opportunity to get that hat trick, that 100-point, all of that. But there were a couple of times where I felt that the way that they were not allowing the Canadiens to break out of their own zone was when they were changing shifts. There was always a really threatening player sticking around to keep the pressure on in the offensive zone until the shift changed. And that's not something that I have noticed a lot the Canadiens are doing this season. I feel like that's just something that you kind of have to do. Like, it was usually either Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner just staying out a little bit longer, and maybe I wouldn't call it a full double shift or anything like that, but continuing the pressure in the offensive zone while a change happens. And I think that the Canadiens haven't really been doing that all that well this season. I feel like in hindsight, everything from the previous 2 seasons seems really bad. So I can't really measure if there's going to be an improvement on that or not. But obviously you need talented players to do that. But that's something that I used to see the Canadiens do, and they're not doing. And that's something that I definitely want to see a little bit more of. Obviously, they're still having trouble breaking out of their own zone, but their game in other aspects has improved enough that you can kind of comfortably assume that Martin St. Louis is working on other things right now. And the in and out, personnel might be affecting that a little bit, but I definitely want to see the Canadiens do a little bit more with their talented players in the offensive zone to kind of prolong that time. I did note that they were carrying the puck into the zone a bunch of times last night. I really liked that. I did feel that even though like Toronto just looked way better than them, they were still able to execute a lot of plays that I was impressed with. And it was mostly in the offensive milieu and not the defensive one.
Yeah, like I look at this game and I go, Toronto, could throw out their 1 and 2 there. And those are lines I feel like I saw the most were, Tavares, Nylander, Marner, Matthews, some Mikheyev and stuff. And it's like, yeah, they can do that. They can ride those guys through that and stymie the Canadiens because, and we'll talk about it in 3 up, 3 down. And it's something I wrote for Eyes on the Prize. Until they get the top line sorted out, they're just pasting guys to Suzuki and Caulfield, requiring them to be more creative on what they're doing here. So it went that way. And I get exactly what you're saying, is seeing that there's always one guy hanging back and kind of frustrating the Canadiens a little bit. And you have to remember, Martin St. Louis, like 30 something games into his coaching career. He's learning as much as these players are right now too. And it's tough when you're playing in and out with a lineup that, doesn't feature 4 solid lines and are in flux constantly without your starting goaltender. I find it very hard to be upset about the way the game went overall, but I think that this is one of those learning games from Martin St. Louis, like kind of like the game against Winnipeg was, where they lost 8-4. They still learned a lot from that. I think that this is a game where they look at it and go, we've got to change up how we're doing breakouts and stuff. I think the biggest thing is they've got to get the defensive zone coverage stuff flattened out here. A game against Toronto where you're turning the puck over to a Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews or William Nylander is not the way to go at all. And yeah, Montembeault and Allen, when he was in there, were great, but you got to clean that up, because if that doesn't get better, it does not matter how good your team is. You're going to end up with pucks in the back of the net.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it is important to note, too, that Toronto has the personnel to keep that pressure up, right? Like the Canadiens, on that elite talent level, you've got Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield on their way to being that. That's what you've got to work with. So obviously Toronto has seasoned veterans who are also superstars, and that's very, very different. So the Canadiens will need a little bit help on the personnel front. In the meantime, there has been some goalie news that might affect the Laval Rocket, and we're going to talk about that in just one quick moment. But first, I want to tell you about something that I use. I started taking Athletic Greens because I wanted to take control of my health. It supports better sleep quality and recovery. It supports mental clarity and alertness, and is the one thing with the best things. Athletic Greens uses the best of the best products based on the latest science, with constant product iterations and third-party testing. With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. Literally all the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially heading into the flu and cold season. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So the Canadiens have had to recall Cayden Primeau from the Rocket, thereby prolonging his 2022 season of torture. I feel like bringing him up is just kind of like he, every kind of AHLer waits for the day that the NHL club is going to call him up, and Cayden Primeau is probably the kind of guy that's like hiding his phone so he won't get the call up. Poor guy. So obviously we can tell that Jake Allen's going to be out for a while, and Carey Price is likely not coming back for the Monday game based on this news.
Yeah, it's a really tough spot for the Canadiens because they had obviously the Rocket this weekend had 2 games. Primeau started on Saturday and started rough, but closed the door and allowed the Rocket to get a win there. And if Price isn't ready yet, you don't rush that back because you don't have a setback for a guy who's had so many setbacks this season here. I think Montembeault's going to get the majority of starts here down until Price is ready. I think Primeau is there to be a placeholder for it because every game that the Habs play this week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, the Rocket play as well. So I think that they're hoping that Price is back before too long for that because that leaves just Kevin Poulin in Laval right now as a contracted goalie, and he missed Saturday's game with a non-COVID illness. So it's a very touch and go time for a team that is on the cusp of clasping. They're 14 or clinching a playoff spot. Their magic number is 14 points, and they have 4 games this week. That could very easily be a clinching scenario before long, assuming they're healthy. I don't know what to make of Primeau at the NHL level this year because the team's been bad. He hasn't been great, but the team in front of him hasn't helped at all. And in the AHL, he's had some shaky starts and he's bounced back. He's had some good starts where he falls apart. He's a prospect in every sense of the word here. So I'm very curious, and I wonder if with the NCAA season over, if there's any free agent goalies out there that the Rocket go, we need someone here in case, Price isn't ready to go yet and we don't have Primeau for a while. You got to have somebody because Kevin Poulin can't start 4 games in a week for the next 3 weeks. That's just a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. And it does seem like Carey Price is nearing readiness. Why would he travel if he's not, right? He's been taking the morning skates and things like that. And I just think that maybe it's just insurance and they send him back down tomorrow. We don't know. Maybe Carey Price is ready to go in the morning, right? Like, so when you're listening to this, it'll be a bit later than this morning that he might be ready to go. And they're like, all right, Cayden, you can go back up or go back down. We don't know, right? Like, we want to see Carey Price come back at home as fans. We want to see that happen. We want to see a welcome at the Bell Center. That might not happen, but either way, I think that the Rocket, I went to a game on Friday night. So I went to the game that Scott was talking about last week with the old-timey jerseys. It was a little bit gimmicky, but I did enjoy it. Even the band that they had. So like apparently on Friday nights, they have a second period intermission concert and they feature local bands, which is so cool. And the band was even themed to the old-timey like theme night. I love that. And the Rocket are a really good game game. And I've been to many, many AHL games, and most of them have been terrible hockey. But this one was a great game. It was super fun. It was against the Americans. Obviously, they won every game that they played this week, right? They won Wednesday, they won Friday, they won Saturday. Kevin Boulain was in goal for the game that we went to. It was an overtime win. And it was a really, really good time. And it's so gratifying to see how far the Rocket have come, not just in terms of fan support. Like, the fans there were so passionate. They were so excited. And it was a fun atmosphere, and it's very affordable. We had amazing seats, and I think I paid like $39 each or something for the seats, including the fees. So it was a fantastic time. And the hockey itself was really, really good. And like I said, all the HL games that I've been to before have been bad. A lot of them were Laval games in the Lefebvre era. So the team was not good. Like, I think that I went to like 6-1 losses and things like that. And if you are in the area and you want to go to a game, I highly recommend you go to Place Bell. It's a great little arena. Parking is terrible. It's awful. Take the metro. It is metro. It's literally like you leave the metro and it's kind of kitty corner. You walk to the corner. It's kitty corner to that. But parking is awful. Just so you know, when I recommend you go to Place Bell, don't take your car. And it was a really fun time, and it's just so exciting. And I think if the Rocket make the playoffs, we're going to obviously have regular coverage on Locked On Canadiens, because they will be playing games past the Canadiens. So I'm really excited for that. And I really do hope they make the playoffs, because it'll be really fun.
And that's the thing about it is that the game they played Friday night I'm sitting at home covering this, and I'm going, they started out well, and they were by far the better team. They put like 44 shots on net, and they just couldn't get a bounce. And I'm like, this is the kind of game that spirals the team a little bit, because it's frustrating. And they come out and they play frustrated the next game. And then at the end of the game, it was Cedric Paquette, of all people, lays a big hit, and he gets mobbed by 3 different Rochester players. And then all of a sudden, it's just Sami Niku alone in the slot in the offensive zone, and he ties the game. And I go, you know what? If that's it, cool. Getting a point out of this is great to score in the final minute. Then they won in overtime with Niku and Raphael Harvey-Pinard combining for the game winner. Every little thing they do, they've built a team that isn't just winning on luck or one player. I said it when I was in the Twitter spaces last night, is that their team is not a superstar-driven team. It's everyone's pulling the rope effort. It's Harvey-Pinard, it's JS Day, it's Alex Belzile. Everyone is pulling their weight on this. And then on Saturday, they were down 3-0 after 10 minutes. Cayden Primeau looked real shaky in net, and they came back to score 5 straight goals to beat the top team in the division, one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, and run to a 3-0 record on the weekend there. It's really impressive what they're able to do with this team here. And I know everyone doesn't love the AHL. I get it, whatever. Check out the Rocket. I'm begging you. They're not loaded with prospect talent yet, because those eggs haven't come to roost for the team yet, but they're going to be, and they're setting a really strong groundwork for a team that's going to be hopefully, very good for the next couple of years here as these prospects develop. So Highly recommend it. Good value, great arena. It's a good time, but they are on the road this week. So wait till they come back and they play the Marlies in their next game.
That's always a fun time, Toronto, Laval.
Oh.
Yes, we do not know. It is. It's truly a fun time. I do enjoy those games, and I definitely encourage people to check it out. I do want to say Sami Niku. I feel like he's one of those players. I think you mentioned this on a previous episode, where he seems too good for the AHL, but he's not cracking the NHL.
He's the most bizarre player. Is that I did a thread about him earlier this week on Wednesday when I was watching the play, and that he does all the things right. He
looks amazing out there.
He looks so good, and he looks too good for the AHL. But even at the NHL level, he had very good scoring metrics. He had 6 assists in 13 games, and then it almost looks like it's too easy for him at the AHL level. And then he just started piling in points as the season went on, or as the week went on. There, he had a very big game against Rochester, and he had another solid game against Utica. And he's going to have to be one of those guys. Xavier Ouellet stepped up a lot, but Sami Niku has quietly been really, really good for the Rocket. And selfishly, I'd like to see him get a shot with the Canadiens. I'd love to see a Harris Niku pairing in the NHL. but I can understand why they might not do that while he's leading the Rocket right now. He's someone that I think they should bring back next year if he's able to. And I think he's going to be a frustrating player for a lot of people just because it looks like he's not trying when he just makes it look so easy on the blue line.
It's true. He does. It looks effortless. He's gliding out there. He looks so good. He was the player that I noticed the most during that game. And to be fair, I was kind of looking out for that as well, just because like defense has been on my mind. If you've listened to any of the past like 2 weeks of episodes, like defense is really, I'm focused on that a lot right now. But I did enjoy it, and it was a great game. And we will keep following the Rocket as well as the Habs on this podcast. But it is Monday, and we are coming up on our favorite Monday segment, and that is 3 Up and 3 Down. That's coming up in just one moment. But first, BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season, as well as the NHL playoffs. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, especially since we keep talking about these NHL awards and Austin Matthews and all of that. That's where you should go. BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, you'll know that we love Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a chocolate bar, like a candy bar. They are all delicious. They have 18 delicious regular flavors that are all high in protein, low in sugar, made with real chocolate. They're delicious, but they also have a rotation of special edition flavors, like, for example, churro puffs, which is kind of like a marshmallow covered in chocolate, filled with protein, gives you a bunch of energy. Like I said, they're all high in protein. I use them a lot as a mid-afternoon pick-me-up, or sometimes if I wake up and I'm in a rush, I'll have them as breakfast. They'll give me the energy. They'll keep me satiated. I will definitely turn to Built Bar a lot. And if you want to try any of their really delicious flavors, you can go to built.com and enter locked15 to get 15% off your order. That is built.com, locked15 to get 15% off your order. All right, Scott, you said you had some stuff for 3 Up and 3 Down.
Yeah, we're going to start with the down here. And my first thing is, and I hate doing this because I like him as a player, but I wrote an article for Eyes on the Prize talking about Rem Pitlick. And this is not him as a player that's on my down list. It's him as a top line winger. That is him on my down list. The fit isn't there. Offensively, it's great, but with the minutes that Nick Suzuki is being asked to play for the Canadiens, Rem Pitlick is not defensively capable enough to be effective in those minutes. He was by far the worst player in terms of possession metrics against Toronto in a game where it was not pretty across the board. And I look at him, he's going to be coming up for a restricted free agent contract in the offseason here, and Andrew Berkshire wrote about it as well. They got to be careful in that. His scoring numbers have kind of regressed a little bit because he's not shooting the lights out. He's a useful piece, but he is not a top-line winger for this team. And I think that experiment probably needs to end right now, just because I think it's unfair to ask Suzuki and Caulfield to kind of carry him a little bit, and it's hampering those top line's effort when they spend most of the time trying to get the puck out of the zone, and by the time they do, they have to change. It's just not a thing that's working right now, and I think Pitlick is better served as a bottom six kind of winger there with speed and pace to help stretch the defenses out.
I agree with you. I think just his defensive game is just non-existent, right? And so a lot of times when we criticize players, it is kind of a usage issue more than anything else. And I think on this year's Canadiens, it's literally most of the decisions are, well, who else are we going to put there, right? So I think that's kind of, they're hampered by that. And I do think that the off season is going to change a lot of things. And, people keep asking, what about Martin St. Louis? I would put lots of money on it at betonline.net that he's going to re-sign with the Canadiens. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, it's like, yeah, I think he's going to re-sign. And my thought is pay him like for the role that he's going to be in. I think he and Jake Evans could be a useful piece there. But yeah, like you said, it's who else are we going to play there right now kind of thing. Right. My thought is just put Josh Anderson back there for right now. He's not as defensively sound, but that line was working earlier. So why not just go back to that? There's 9 games left in the season or 10 games left in the season. Just just go ahead and do it. Like, it's not the end of the world.
And Josh Anderson can do a back check. It just looks exactly like his forecheck is the problem. I love Josh Anderson. I love Josh Anderson. You know that. Everybody knows that. This podcast, we are fans of Jake Allen, Jake Evans, and Josh Anderson, obviously, in addition to Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. And I was going to say one of the downs was going to be the defensive play in general, but we have been talking about that a lot, so I don't want to dwell on it too much. But I really think that the Canadiens are just, they're kind of like plastered in their own zone. And that I'm not a fan of that, because they can make things happen on offense. And, you know, everything that we say is like, oh, there's only 9 games left in the season. It's a nightmare season. It's going to be over, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, if we're going to criticize something, defensive play is definitely at the top of my list.
I think so as well. Is that it's hilarious to me is that they had this structure and ability during a 5-on-3 against Toronto, and then the minute it returned to 5-on-5, they just completely lost their minds. And I went, what? Do what you were just doing, only with 2 extra people on the ice. Like it blows my mind that was a thing. The defensive zone play leaves so much to be desired. And that's why I think we're going to get a coaching change over here. And that actually kind of leads into my next thing a little bit. My other down is the power play is struggling a little bit. I don't, and at both levels, quite frankly, for the Rocket and for the Canadiens. So just simplify it, guys, and do what you know works. That end of the game, 6-on-4 was just a mess where you have guys who just didn't know what to do and everyone's panicking. You're NHL players, you know, take a deep breath and know what you do best. So,
and now it's time for 3-Up.
I'm going to start. I'm going to go right to the AHL for this one because Raphael Harvey-Pinard has been an absolute monster for the Rocket. He had a 4-point night and a couple of multi-point games. He's been really, really, really good for the Rocket. So he's someone I think is going to make some noise for the NHL next year. And someone I think a lot of fans are really going to enjoy watching if they haven't had a chance to see him as well.
Absolutely. I agree with you. One of my ups is also, obviously we talked about Sami Niku in the previous segment, so I'm not going to use an up on that. I'm going to talk about Jake Evans. I think it's been a couple weeks since we've praised him. I think he had a really strong game against New Jersey, and he kind of is emblematic. And one thing we should say about the Canadiens is that even against Toronto, you know, it was a 3-2 game, and up until the last minute, they kept pressing. They did not give up. They literally did not. They were helped out by a power play. I am going to say that, and it's not a good power play, but I thought that the Canadiens, you know, it would have been so easy to wilt against Toronto, and they didn't do that. And so that's a positive, and Jake Evans is kind of part of that no quit attitude. What about you, Scott?
I have to give an up to Martin St. Louis and Jeff Petrie here. And this quote comes from Habs and High Heels on Twitter. Habs Jeff Petrie on Martin St. Louis. He gave me that confidence. He said he watched a lot of my games over the years. I've played against him. And he said, know the player you can be. And he just said, I'm going to bring that back. And I think that a lot of what Petrie said last night at his return to lineup after the game is it doesn't sound like a guy who's going to be leaving. He sounded like a guy who wants to be here to help fix this team. And I know a lot of people with Reddit try not to, you know, they might overanalyze things a little bit, but I look at this and go, he put a lot of pressure on himself to replace Shea Weber this year. And when things went wrong, that just kind of seeped into his game a little bit. So I think Petrie is someone I want to give an up to here. I think that he's gotten better as the season has gone on, but obviously not the season he wanted, but I think Martin St. Louis is one of those guys that's really going to help him kind of get back. If he's here next year, if he's not, it is what it is. But I really do think that in these final couple games, Martin St. Louis is going to do everything to try and get Jeff Petrie back to being Jeff Petrie.
Yeah, it's a lot for the player, the organization, and the coach to think about. As you know, if you've listened to this podcast prior to this season, we are big fans of Jeff Petrie. This was not a good season for him. This was not a good season for a lot of people. So we are going to keep following that. And speaking of not good seasons, Jonathan Drouin has had surgery in New York. I do not want people just crapping on Jonathan Drouin. All I'm stating is that he's not going to be ready until training camp, whether that's with the Canadiens or somewhere else. Like it's a completely neutral statement that he has had surgery. He's out until training training camp. That's all I'm going to say on that. So obviously there will not be a Jonathan Drouin in the lineup for the next 9 games. However, we're going to continue to cover the next 9 games. And then after that, we have so many things planned for the off season, for the Canadiens off season, as well as the full off season. We've got so many prospect profiles, draft people. We're going to bring in people to talk about, are we wrong about certain players? I love those interviews and those segments and those exercises. And there's so much to cover. So please subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. You can email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. If you have mailbag questions or segment ideas, you can also put in the YouTube comments mailbag questions or segment ideas. We love to explore those topics. Just never be a jerk, because we're just going to block you. At the same time, you can follow Scott at Scott Matla, myself at The Active Stick on Twitter. And if you liked this podcast, please check out Lockdown Fantasy Hockey, because now is the time, as the season's wrapping up, that they're going to be your most important listen after us. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.